Hi, this is Tony Segro. I'm at the Columbia and Susquehanna Model Railroad layout at the Columbia Historic Preservation Society. And you heard me mention about the Columbia CNS Model Railroad. And this here is basically the model railroad. Okay, it's HO scale. And down there farther is another section of layout that, it's probably hard to see down here along the wall down there where that circle is. A lot of the stuff that I've modeled here is on this layout, some dioramas that I wanted to show you also. And we'll start here and walk around a little bit and take a look at models, and I'll give you a little piece of history because this section over here behind the wall there is all prototype, okay? So sit back and relax, and I hope you enjoy the video. This is an area here that I call Hilltown, and it's still part of the layout. Eventually it might be changed, but these buildings I scratch built to represent the town, a town like on a hill where the train goes through the wall here and into another area of the layout. But these buildings back here are all scratch built. And the picture on the wall back there is actually a picture on 3rd Street that I used. Maybe I can come in here and do a few close-up videos or pictures or whatever. Down here is another little wall feature, the water and all that I did, like I did in the first video. And I like to do that kind of stuff. These are some of the buildings right here that I scratch built. They're not really part of Columbia or anything. It's more like a generic town, but it sort of reminds me, I saw pictures of Manayunk, which is a town near Philadelphia, and the railroad goes right by. And there's a wall there, and the railroad's next to it, but these aren't buildings from Manayunk. They're just scratch-built things. George Celios does, I mentioned him in the first video. These are some of the other buildings that I sort of was inspired by his kind of modeling and all. Back here along the wall, I just used plain photographs that I printed from Pinterest and added those to the wall. They're just photographs glued to the wall. And this bridge here, this first bridge on the outside, this one I scratch built using Central Valley bridge parts, and it's a truss bridge. It just carries the Reading line across this set of tracks down here. Okay. The first thing I wanted to show you is the St. Charles iron furnace. Okay, and this wasn't part of the original layout. This I put in, say, within the last 6 months. And this represents the St. Charles iron furnace. Columbia was a connecting part of the Pennsylvania Canal system, okay, or the mainline works, as they called it. The Pennsylvania Canal was used to move people and goods from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. And when New York did their Erie Canal, Pennsylvania didn't want to be second class, so they wanted to have a canal of their own. So they did Pennsylvania Canal. The first leg of the Pennsylvania Canal is the Columbia and Philadelphia Railroad. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail of the Columbia and Philadelphia Railroad, but this is a book that was written way back, I think, in 1896 by William Hassel Wilson. Okay, and it says the Columbia Philadelphia Railroad and its successor. Well, its successor happens to be the Pennsylvania Railroad. Okay. Now, if you look at this boat, what they used to do is, and I don't know if you can see, if I can zoom in maybe a little bit, you notice wheels underneath this, looks like a barge or a boat. Okay, and that's the way they moved things from Philadelphia to Columbia. They put them on the railroad, and when they came to Columbia, they were put on, the canal. All right, through an inclined plane that went down along where or parallel to Manor Street here in Columbia, if you're familiar with the area. And over here, I did a sort of a scratch-built rendition of that kind of canal boat. Okay, and I figured it might have been pulled by horses or something. So we have a few horses pulling the canal boat. And it goes along a canal that made of polyurethane and such. And the St. Charles Iron Furnace is the first furnace between Columbia and Marietta. This area was known for iron ore. Now, I don't know if we had more iron ore than the Mesabi Range or whatever out in Minnesota or whatever, but we had a lot of iron ore in this area. If you're familiar with Ironville, which is a tiny town outside of Columbia, there's a lake out there right now. It's called Grubbs Lake. At one time, that used to be an iron ore mine at the bottom of that lake. Okay, the Grubb family was prominent in the iron ore and industry and such, from up around Cornwall and all down to this area. Okay, so this here I sort of did as a, this is all scratch built, as a rendition from pictures that I saw of the St. Charles Iron Furnace. Okay, now a few years ago, or I'm going to say a number of years ago, there was a man here in town. He was a painter from Germany. His name was Klaus Grutzka, and I remember Bud Heim was telling me that he built or he painted furnaces and he painted factories and such, and he's buried in the area, I know. But he also was talking to me and was telling me a lot of things and showed me some things about the iron furnace. This here plaster building I actually bought as a kit or building down at Timonium one year. So I didn't scratch build that. That was already made. This area here, I sort of put it back against the wall a little bit. The only part, if you walk the Pennsylvania, the Northwest River Trail, it goes from Columbia up to Falmouth around 3 Mile Island, Falmouth, I guess. This here is along the trail before you get to the Route 30 bridge, the current Route 30 bridge. Okay, and you'll see the remnants of this kiln or whatever in there. Okay, so this is the St. Charles Iron Furnace. Now, coming around the corner from the St. Charles Iron Furnace, that was right over here, is the town of Columbia. And this is the largest diorama I think that I've ever built. And the total time from the beginning to end of this diorama took about 16 years. The buildings are modeled the way Columbia would have looked back in, say, the 1930 to 1950 range, okay? We did that because we wanted to run steam and diesel. Now, if you're familiar with Columbia, this building here is the current Bootleg Antiques on Bridge Street, okay? And here's Bridge Street coming down. Coming farther out here, hopefully I don't make you dizzy going too fast. Here's a model of the iron bridge that used to cross the Susquehanna River to Wrightsville. Trains and cars used to use that bridge, so the cars had to wait for the trains to come across. But the piers in there were the same piers that were used for the bridge that was burned in the Civil War to prevent the Confederate Army from coming to Lancaster County. Okay, story on that is the Confederate Army got as far as Wrightsville and couldn't get across the river because the bridge was burned. While the bridge was being burned, was set fire by 4 Columbia people. The flames, the fire was started on the Wrightsville side. The flames were starting to go back toward Wrightsville. So the Confederate Army, along with the civilians of Wrightsville, or citizens, actually worked to keep the town from catching on fire. Okay, so that, in a way, the Confederates were helping out, Wrightsville and stuff. But this here is, and I'll zoom in on some of this. That one building there, that is a kit. It's a DPM kit I just put in there. But all these other buildings were actually scratch built based on photographs that we have downstairs in the Historical Society. This building was the trolley barn. We had trolley cars here in Columbia, and that was a trolley barn. Back in the other video, I might have mentioned the Belmont Mansion when I talked about mock-ups. Well, this is the actual Belmont Mansion that I built, and it too was made out of clay. The buildings along the back are still on 2nd Street. Okay, it's that street along the back there. Okay, come down Walnut Street. This is Walnut Street right here. The trolley line came down Walnut Street. And let me come around here a minute and carefully zoom in on this building right here. This was the home of Lloyd Mifflin at one time. He was America's greatest sonneteer. Okay, he wrote poetry. He was an artist. Okay, coming down Walnut Street. This building is still standing. Was the Pennsylvania Railroad station in Columbia, but now it's an ice cream parlor or an ice cream shop. And these tracks here weren't really in Columbia. We had to put this yard here because the yard would have been way down there past the end of the roundhouse. So we have the yard here. This is where the Columbia Railroad yard was. Okay, there's the Tremont Hotel, and the story was that Al Capone stayed there, so he paid a visit to Columbia now and then too. Now it's around the Columbia River Park, current River Park, where the Reading Railroad also had a coal dock. Okay, and the coal dock, they shipped coal down from the coal regions and they put them onto the river here on barges here at the coal dock. And I don't want to zoom in where I take it out of focus, but the coal dock is right here around where the river park is. Okay, and the coal was put on boats or whatever and sent down toward Baltimore, down the Susquehanna River to the Chesapeake Bay. Okay, there's another roundhouse in Columbia. As a matter of fact, we had two. The first one is this main roundhouse that we see right over here. That's at the end of Bridge Street. And the second roundhouse, if I come down along the railroad, this is the Pennsylvania Railroad here, is right here, which is down near where Plain Street and Franklin Street and such are. And it's where we have the Wagon Works, which is a current apartment building. Okay, but this is basically the railroad line, the railroad routes that came to Columbia. This railroad going off this way goes toward Mountville and Centerville and Rohrerstown and all. That's the Pennsylvania Railroad. Down here was the Pennsylvania Railroad along the river, but it's now the Port Road, they call it, because it goes to Port Deposit. And this railroad here going up through is the Reading Railroad, and it goes out through to Ironville, Silver Springs, and over toward Ephrata, and Manheim, Ephrata, and Sinking Spring, where it joins the Reading Main Line. This great church back here is the building we're standing in right now. This is the Historical Society. It used to be the first evangelical Lutheran church. Okay, this building across the street had many things. It was a potato chip factory, and it's right now in the works of becoming a hotel for Hampton Inn. These buildings here, also that includes the building on the corner. This building up back in here, the tall building was Oddfellows Hall, was used as a hospital in the Civil War. As they brought people, injured people across the river from Gettysburg, the Battle of Gettysburg. The little building here on the side, if I can come around, is the Bank Museum, which still stands at 2nd and Locust Street. These are buildings coming down along Locust Street. And some of these buildings here at the end were taken out because of they were torn down. Some of them were fixed up and made better and all. Over on the other side of the street, the white building there was the Franklin House. That's still there. This building here was S&G Printing. It was also the home of the Columbia Bank and Bridge Company that owned the bridge that was burned down in the Civil War. I think there's a paranormal group over that's in there now. Let's see. There's the Foresters there at the corner. These buildings along 2nd Street are still there. They're apartment buildings and such. This building was owned by one of the Wrights. The building across the street, the red one, was the North Museum, or North Mansion, which was owned by the man Eugene North, that was involved with the North Museum at Franklin and Marshall College. This is the Wright Mansion, which is one of the oldest houses in Columbia, where the founders of Columbia lived, John Wright. Okay, this building was a Methodist church at one time. I believe now it's a Buddhist church. These buildings along here, that was the original Columbia Hospital was there. These buildings are some mansions or whatever along 2nd Street that are still there. The big tall building here is the, it's an antique place now called Rivertown or Rivermore or something. And used to be a tobacco factory or tobacco warehouse, the Forey Tobacco Warehouse. Come down here along Front Street, these buildings don't exist anymore. They were just houses along Front Street, which was also part of Columbia's red light district. But they were torn down to build a fire company. The building over here that I'm going to pan back over is the Columbia railroad station for the Reading Railroads, the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad, I believe. This is the train shed where the trains would have been backed into that station from Manor Street. Coming around the front, it's a building that was modeled, built by Frank Furness, and it was a challenge to model it in HO scale, but that was done by photographs. Okay. Coming down a little bit further, back here is the St. Peter's Church, which is still there. This is the rectory for St. Peter's. Over here is the convent and the school. The convent I made, those round things are made out of toilet paper rolls that were empty, you know. But those are both gone. I believe the convent burned down, and the school may have been torn down, and I'm not sure exactly the year. And there's another school that's there now. I'm not sure if they use that school. They might, but I know a lot of the kids now go to Our Lady of the Angels. This is Union Street. Okay, a lot of these buildings are still there. And we have parts of 2nd Street modeled. They're just generic houses along 2nd Street. Now, there was no tunnel in Columbia. We did that just to run trains through the wall. This here is our rendition of the Union Street silk mill that was down there. It wasn't exactly like this, but it's our representation of it. So this sort of covers about close to 200 square feet of the layout. And like I said, 99% of these buildings are scratch built. The only ones that weren't would be the roundhouses and such.